Welcome, everyone. We're very pleased to have Mark Brecke here with us today. Mark's a documentary photographer and filmmaker who has been documenting war, ethnic conflict, and genocide over 10 years in 3 continents in some of the most troubled regions of the world, including Cambodia, Rwanda, Kosovo, Sudan, West Bank, and Iraq. In 2004, Amnesty International selected Mark's documentary film, War is a Second Language, to be included in their permanent archive. Since returning from Darfur in December 2004, Mark has been touring with images of the Sudan crisis, and has given over 100 lectures and presentations. He's spoken at UCLA School of Law, Kennedy School of Government at Harvard, at Brown University, the Fletcher School at Tufts, the World Affairs Council, and has been featured on Current TV and NPR, as well as Amy Goodman's Democracy Now! Mark's most recent project is a documentary film titled They Turned Our Desert into Fire. The film captures Amtrak passengers' reactions to photos and stories as they are informed about the crisis in Darfur and interviewed for National Public Radio. Brecke had the opportunity to film while traveling from San Francisco to Washington, D.C. to present his Darfur presentation to members of Congress in July 2005. In 2006, the U.S. Senate selected 10 of Mark's Darfur photographs to be hung in the Russell Rotunda of the U.S. Capitol building in Washington, D.C. Please join me in welcoming Mark Brecke.
Thank you very much. My apologies for bringing in analog into Google. I have my own slide projector, by the way. We'll work on this. I do have a short DVD of a film trailer that he mentioned of a documentary that's almost finished. Will be completed in January of 2007, but we'll start with some of the photographs I took in the Darfur region of Sudan. You want to turn on the projector? Thanks. Q&A will be afterwards. If you have any questions, please ask, or come up to me afterwards if you're too shy to ask during the presentation or afterwards. Little focus, please. Thank you. These are political cartoons. I do a lot of research before I go to these places. I'm not a journalist. I just happen to work in current events. This came out in July of 2004, and if you saw, it's very dated, not so much the date, but the number of confirmed killed, about 35,000. The next slide, please. And here is another one a year later, March 12th, 2005. On the anniversary of Rwanda in 2004, April, there was interest in Darfur, and this kind of sparked kind of a grassroots movement with SaveDarfur.org and all these student groups who have mobilized at the university level, high school level, and around the world now to pick up the slack where the media and the politicians have definitely failed the people of Sudan. Next slide, please. And this is the Darfur region. This is going to be quick. You could spend, a month on the politics alone. To understand what's happening in Western Darfur, you must understand the North-South war that happened since the early 80s and recently with the fragile peace agreement in 2005. As you may know, Sudan is the largest country on the continent alone, period. This region is about the size of France, Darfur, or Texas. And to the left is Chad, eastern Chad. Those are the 12 refugee camps run by the UN. There's 200,000 plus in these camps. And within Darfur, you see in the pink symbols, those are the confirmed villages that were burned. And you have about almost 3 million people now that are refugees in their own country, called IDPs, internally displaced. The Khartoum government does not want you there, especially now, even back then. From 2004, September through December, I spent in the region. I was in Sudan without a visa. I went across the border with the Sudanese Liberation Army and spent months with the People's Army to document the ongoing crisis. Next slide, please. This is Gusano refugee camp. There's about 29,000 people who live in this tent city. This was a camp that was in the very far north, the last one up on the eastern border of Chad. Here I knew I would meet members of the Sudanese Liberation Army. This is my first day in the camp. I spent 1 month living with the UN in the compound. Next slide, please. These are new arrivals. Now, what you must understand, this is year number 3 that's happening in Darfur. You don't see much of this happening today because what ethnic cleansing could be done has been done, and there's not too many people left to come across the border. They're either in the camps or they've been killed. What you see in these lines is mostly women and children. The men have been targeted from 16 to 45. If they think they're going to join the rebel movement, definitely targeted for extermination. Next slide, please. Of the 400,000 or so, 300, 400,000 people play kind of games with numbers. This is a systematic campaign by its own government. The majority of people died by a man-made famine. It's one of the oldest forms of weapons of mass destruction. It's very effective. You burn people off their land, destroy their water sources, kill their cattle, and burn their homes, and they're in this desert basically to starve. How to detect malnutrition or famine is these children have to be measured, their arms, each one. This is a process done by different NGOs. It's long but necessary. Next slide, please. This is something that wasn't covered in the press. This is more of a cultural identity. It is too simplistic to say this is African Arab. It is not like that. They are both of the Muslim faith. And in eastern Chad alone, or in Chad is one of the poorest countries in the world, a lot of people would like to get school, water, and food. And to make sure that the UN is really serving the people in Darfur, one member of the family comes and swears on the Quran that she is a refugee from the Darfur crisis. Next slide, please. They'd hire the local people in Chad. There was some of this same tribe, only the colonization divided the sand. The French in Chad, of course, and the British in the Sudan. And so this is a family registering. There again, you don't see any men or young boys. Next slide, please. This is a registration card. If you need to say focus, I'm a little close. Go ahead and say focus, and somebody else can. Okay, that's good. To be a refugee by international, the UN and standards, you have to cross into another country. And of course, I've done this in Chad. She has 12 stamped in her card. This is a feeding card. This is a card you need to live in the refugee camps. And you must understand, these people may be here, 15, 20 years at best conservative estimate. There's nothing to go back to in Darfur, especially now. It's quite dangerous. Next slide, please. If there's one photo that sums up Darfur then and Darfur today, it is definitely this one. This is the one I've sent to the media quite a bit. This is a mother just arriving with her 7 children about an hour before this photo was taken. They have witnessed their father, their brother, their uncle murdered in front of them. The women have been multiply raped, trust me in this one. And they've seen their villages destroyed, yet they're able to gather their children and make it into these camps. In eastern Chad, sometimes 20, 30, 60 days. If they have a donkey or camel, they're lucky. Most of it's by foot. Next slide, please. This is another mother with her children, completely exhausted, did not even go through the registration process you saw before. Just collapsed in the sand through a translator. They told me the story. Next slide, please. This is a woman trying to rebuild what she had in Darfur. And like I said, they're going to be there for a while, so they're trying to make it as comfortable as possible. This is a circle. This is, replicates their house. Usually there's a grass hut on top of it. Next slide, please. These images were kind of generic when the crisis was kind of slightly covered by the media in August of 2004. These are refugees who just made it into Chad and they're too traumatized to register with the UN camp. And you can get a good perspective of what they've fled with their lives. Their blankets are in the trees, their water jugs, this kind of thing. This very similar image was on the cover of The Economist in 2004, September, with the caption on top saying, "Sudan can't wait." And of course, now it's 2006, November, and it has waited much too long. Next slide, please. To make sure the food distribution is organized, the World Food Program has set up a system where they ink blot every child 1 per day. It's about a kilo of porridge they get per child. I should mention that the United States is the #1 food donor to the World Food Program. But the supplies are actually running low since I was there. Next slide, please. And this is a woman with her daily rations ready to tie her child on their back with her blanket. These people are farmers, they're shepherds, they have come from a very proud culture. They're not used to handouts, they're used to fending for themselves. Darfur has to be one of the most geographically challenging places in the world, by the way, for any civilization to live off of. The average woman in Darfur knows about 28 different natural roots and plants. If the crops don't come in, she can feed her children. They rely on 12 to 18 inches of rain a year only in this very rugged desert. Next slide, please. I've done many versions of this slide presentation in the last 2 years. So some is longer, some is shorter. This one will be a little shorter. When I was in the refugee camp in Okasani, I made contact with a satellite phone to one of the representatives of the Sudanese Liberation Army. Now, they have changed quite a bit since I've been there. There was a man named Suleiman Jammous. He was a humanitarian affairs coordinator. He is no longer with them. In fact, he was captured by them and put under house arrest by Mini Manawi, the leader of the SLA. He was responsible and kind of the unsung hero of Darfur for granting safe passage for NGOs and journalists and filmmakers such as myself through Darfur in 2004, 2005. And the world would have seen a lot less of Darfur if it wasn't for Suleiman Jammous, this is for sure. They picked me up in a truck. I came to the border. This is the desert, and they're leading me down to where the truck is by the border of Chad. Next slide, please. You can focus that a little bit. It's a little light. Just the light in here. I usually sat in the middle of the truck. This is typical. They sat on the side. Next slide, please. And this is a village called Farawiya. It's about an hour and a half from the Chad border. So once you leave the sanctuary in the sense of the UN, you're now in Darfur with the opposition. And I was there for quite some time. This is the first image that I photographed. They wanted to show me this is a mass grave site. Now, with the size roughly of Texas, there's probably a lot of these. These men were brought up to the rocks. They were murdered. There's 13 of them. Over 12 years ago, 11 years ago, I was in Rwanda, another small country people knew very little about except for the silverback mountain gorillas. In Rwanda, of course, you don't have to look far for this. Mass grave sites were stacked up along the side of the road. Next slide, please. And then again, 10 years later, I find myself in yet another country in the continent of Africa, photographing basically the same thing. Next slide. These images are never easy to photograph. I should let you know that. No matter how long you've done this, it never gets easy, and you hope it never does. Next slide. Focus. Next slide. This is a water well, one of the few that were still working. Most of the Janjaweed, which is kind of a militia that the government has hired early on, they would poison the wells with either dead bodies or pour petrol down them to make them useless. This is one of the few that actually worked. This is the women throw long buckets of rope. And so some parts of Darfur, you can kind of see the traditional life, but that's slowly fading as well. Next slide, please. When I reached Suleiman Jammous, it was a good opportunity. This is a meeting of the SLA. They're bringing up to par, in a sense, what's happening in Darfur to some of the tribal leaders that stay behind. There again, the SLA have factioned. It's no longer safe to work with them. They'll turn you over to the government. They have other groups call themselves now the National Redemption Front. You have Justice and Equality Movement, which is GEM, and they are more of an Islamic movement and not so much a military power. Next slide, please. And this is Suleiman Jammous with his Thuraya satellite phone. He has a daughter who lives in Indiana, which I've been in contact with. He calls her from his phone. He's got a PhD in paper technology. He used to work for the government itself. The man to the right with a camouflage jacket, he is an international lawyer from the University of Cairo. What I'm trying to say is, and I was very careful to say this to the media when I returned, not all people's movements stay people's movements. You hope they do, but history does not always show this. And of course, now they have their own atrocities on their hands. But these people left a perceivably comfortable life by Sudanese or any standard, by the way, to go fight for what they believe in the desert. They have been marginalized for decades. There's no roads, no schools, no electricity in Darfur. They don't want autonomy. They just want to share power in Sudan and be represented as a Sudanese citizen. Next slide, please. They're extremely armed and very organized. A majority of their trucks were stolen. Everything was stolen from about 2001. Their weapons from the government troops they would attack. The man with the glasses is Goma Hagar. He was the top military commander of the SLA. He may be dead, I don't know. He had some problems on the ground recently. Next slide, please. And this is normally how I traveled with them. They are Toyota Land Cruiser pickup trucks. They chop off the cab to make more room. And there again, when I was there, they would attack if they needed petrol, if they needed more weapons. But there was a ceasefire which was broken on both sides. And things have only gotten worse, as you may read about soon. Next slide, please. These are amulets. They're bits and pieces of the Quran, scorpion tails. They go back a long ways. They're tribal. They protect you now from being raped or killed by the janjaweed, attacks on the villages. I have two I wear as I speak. We were attacked one day, and I'll tell you that later. But they're no different than other amulets in different cultures. They're for protection. This is kind of extreme. The children wear them around their necks in the camps, the women on the inside of their clothing. Next slide, please. And these images have come out in some of the mainstream press as well. This is a village called Anka. There's 100 families that used to live in this village. You can see the circle mud wall is what she was trying to replicate in the refugee camp earlier on. And there again, the roofs are missing. This was completely bombed out and burned out. And I think that's what's really surprised me is the number of villages that were just absolutely destroyed or partially destroyed within a 3-year system. And we'll play a small clip of the film soon, and you'll see Samantha Power describe that very articulately. Next slide, please. Very modest lives, humble lives. They have beds, cooking. This is the inside perspective. Next slide, please. There again as well. What they've had. So you basically have taken nothing from nothing. These are civilians. They've had this complete injustice thrown upon them for the last 3 years, and with a little interaction by the communities of the governments, and including our own. Next slide, please. As they saw me touring with the rebels, they would come out of these IDP camps that were controlled by SLA. I should mention the rebels controlled about 80% of Darfur, 20% of the government. These are bits and pieces of a bomb that this man's shop was burned, and so the evidence is all around. They just don't want you to see it. Next slide, please. This is a woman. The elderly, of course, could not make it to the long journey into Chad or the IDP camps. She's describing how her and her husband they were trying to burn them alive one day in their hut. They bombed them. And how the attacks would happen is that the government gunships from Khartoum would bomb from the sky, and then the Janjaweed would come in on horseback and take care of the rest of the people running out of the village or burning the village. Of course, she's breaking down as she's telling me the story of what happened. Next slide, please. Let's a little focus, please. I'm sorry, the light is kind of bright for slides. This is a women's center. These women stayed behind. They've been through a lot, and now they're just kind of waiting for the SLA, the rebels, to kind of give them instructions on what's going to happen next, as far as security and where do they go from. They're in Darfur, and it's basically a kind of a country that's been extremely broken. There's no government, and there's a lot of lawlessness now. And this is the first day. It was a 2-day meeting, actually. I was able to attend. Next slide, please. This is an IDP camp in rebel-held areas. The ones in the government-controlled areas are much worse. I couldn't go to those. Of course, I would be arrested. And you can see the circle as well now made of sticks. This family lived in Anka, the burned-out village, and he's ready to pour me tea. As you can see it, I'm sat on the blanket. There is, I've never had better hospitality and been treated so well than in this culture, and not because I was a photographer, not because of the crisis. It's just who they are as Sudanese people, period. And Africa itself, especially in the West, and I'm blamed as well, guilty of covering the kind of the tragedy of Africa. There is actually more good, by the way, than there is bad. And if you ever get the chance, as some of you have been here, please visit the continent. It's definitely the best in the world. But it always overwhelms me that people who have absolutely nothing in this world, they really give the most. This is for sure. And this is exactly what he's doing now. Next slide, please. I toured the hospitals. There were still attacks happening when I was there. The Janjaweed shot this man twice in the leg. As you can see, he's in a lot of pain. He's a farmer. He's a civilian. He's not a rebel. Next slide, please. This is another man who was shot in the foot. They came back to kill him, but he was managed to escape a different village, a different hospital. Next slide, please. It's like going back 2,000 years. I've never been more close to a culture in my life, in a sense that you have to live like these people. There's just nothing out there. And, you know, with the size of Texas and very little electricity, maybe 1%, there is no light pollution. I've never seen the stars or the moon so bright in my life than in this region of the world. And it's just utter silence. And we slept outside every night on carpets. And this is about from here to the wall away. One morning I heard this ruckus, and of course it was a wild herd of camel that was passing in front of me in the morning light about 5:30 in the morning. Now when you see images like this and you're immersed in this culture so deep, you kind of forget, you let your guard down that you are in a civil war, you are in a region of ethnic conflict, until you're definitely reminded of that. Next slide, please. This is the first image I shot after we were ambushed one day by government troops and by the Janjaweed, same thing. I was a very startled, tense young rebel. 6 of our guys were hit. We were very lucky, no one was killed. Next slide, please. The next day, they brought me to the medic tent, if you want to call it. They're extremely resourceful. Some are real doctors. Some left medical school in Khartoum to join the movement. I think the majority of their supplies were ripped off, by the way, from the Red Cross. This was a commander I got to know quite well. He was shot through the arm twice. Next slide, please. This is another rebel in a lot of pain. Most of his arm will probably be amputated. Next slide, please. They're performing surgery on this man's hand, what's left of it. Most of it was shot off with AK-47. I should mention as well that he has no anesthesia, nothing. Next slide. And you get a close-up of it. Next slide, please. The next day, he was up, sort of up. He's hooked to an IV. The commander to the left, this gentleman here with Commander Muhyiddin, he was assigned to me by Suleiman Jamous. His English was perfect. Since 9/11, I've only worked in Arabic-speaking countries. My Arabic is a little better, but a long ways to go, that's for sure. We became very close. Him and Suleiman met in 1972 in a factory, and he taught me a lot of Arabic and taught me a lot about Sudanese culture. Next slide, please. Going into Darfur takes about 5 days. I spent a couple months down there. Leaving Darfur, it takes about, depends on where you are, it takes about 6-7 days in those trucks to come back to the border of Chad, and you have to make your international flight back to Paris or something like this, so we have to time it quite well. The UN planes were free of charge this time for filmmakers, journalists, because the crisis we're on is edge of the world. Most of the time this is not the case. As I was leaving Darfur, we met up again with Suleiman Jamous to your left. This image is one that was chosen by the Senate for the Capitol building, and what's significant about this, he's not wearing a uniform. That's why I knew I could slip it under the wire in a sense. And also I have mailed this in a DVD of the installation of these images to his daughter, who's only been in the States for about 1.5 years now, and her father's hanging in the Capitol building. You can imagine what that must feel like. I also have somebody on the ground now shooting some B-roll for me on the Chad-Sudan border. She also brought a DVD of the installation of the photos in the Capitol building, and she's going to show that on her laptop to the refugees in Chad. There again, the voice has been heard, it's just nothing's been done. Next slide, please. This is my last image I took in Darfur, in Chad. As I was coming out, they could not drive into the refugee camps with their gun trucks, and so they had a civilian pick me up. And these are new arrivals. Since I was in Darfur, people had come across the border. This is a family. Within 3 days of this image, I was back in Paris, having coffee with an old friend. What I'm trying to say is I never take it for granted. In a sense, I can always return. I'm here at Google now, which I thank you for having me. They don't, of course. They're always there and usually in the same situation as these images show. Something you have to put in perspective. Next slide, please. Sometimes I show this, sometimes I don't. This was taken by a German photojournalist. This is me with the rebels the first day. Suleiman is to my right with the white turban. I usually sat in the back of the truck. I was always nervous. I'm around a lot of guns, but they never make me feel comfortable, and I preferred, of course, to shoot with a Nikon, which I told them as well. So then this, you can turn off the slide projector. Thank you. We have the DVD set up. This is a trailer. In February of 2005, members of the Hill wanted to see what I did behind rebel lines. I was on this PowerPoint tour, if you want to call it. I said, okay, you stick everybody in one box up there, by the way, and I will come and do the slideshow. Now, the senators and House of Representatives, these people have absolutely no time. It's amazing. And so I knew it was going to be short, and I get the call 2 days before, 17th of July, 2005, and NPR heard me at a Q&A one time saying, I'm going to go on Greyhound bus, because I have to pay for it, by the way. The Senate's not going to pay for my trip. At that time, I said, well, if I have to be on this bus 4 days, I will bring my actual photographs, and I will show them to passengers along the way and get their reactions. And then NPR, with a better idea, they put me on Amtrak. And this is a short clip. It's a feature documentary. It will be released in 2007, January. You can push play. In early 2003, I started to hear stories of a crisis that was happening in the Darfur region of Sudan. And as the year went on, there was a systematic campaign started by the government of ethnic cleansing. When the conflict first arose, the crisis, it was dubbed by quite a few in the community as the first genocide of the 21st century. In 2004, I set out to go to Darfur and spent 3 months in the region. There has been so little coverage of this crisis in the media still today that you can share this. The UN knows about it, the politicians know about it, the international community knows about it. But what I've taken this very tragic story and just sharing it with common citizens on the train, on Amtrak. I will bring my actual prints, my photographs, and I will share them with passengers along the way and get their reactions.
It's quite humbling.
Yes.
You know, and if people in America could actually look at these pictures and not be so selfish and think, you know, that could be us.
Yes.
You know, what if we were attacked one day and all of a sudden my home is gone?
If you look at a map, I mean, it's sort of like clockwork almost the way they worked across the country, the Sudanese government in conjunction with Arab militia on the ground. Now it's a little bit different because much of rural Darfur has already been ethnically cleansed. I mean, 3 million people or more have already been displaced. The farming life that was the foundation for non-Arab tribal groups who are being targeted by the government has been obliterated. You know, so you don't see quite the same systematic campaign of destruction in 2006 that you saw in 2003 and 2004. But again, that's not for good reasons. That's not because the design has changed by Sudan. It's simply because, you know, they have already succeeded in, you know, wiping out non-Arab life as it previously existed.
I called home and my mom, she told me the news that he got killed. And how he got killed, he was in Khartoum and he heard about the Janjaweed and he said, okay, I'm gonna go this year, I'm gonna go to see my kids and my wife. He went to Darfur. The Janjaweed came to his village and the way they killed him, they put him in front of his 5 kids and they blew up his head. So it was very painful, and they did not kill his kids, but they killed him in front of his kids and his wife. And it's sad and it's painful because this person, I know him personally, he don't know politics, he don't know anything. Even he don't know what's the name of politics. He's simple man, he's just looking for simple life and better life for his kids and his wife.
If there was any other way to not put myself, I should say, in the film, I would have done that. To share the photographs in like a one-on-one story, had to be in front of the camera. I should say NPR sent me the recording equipment, and it was a perfect way into the film. People knew and trusted NPR. They paid attention to like the real radio documentary as they were being filmed. The other talking head experts, you saw Samantha Power. If you haven't read her book yet, Problem from Hell, The American Age of Genocide, I recommend it. She's now the Foreign Affairs Advisor, as you saw, for Barack Obama. We have John Prendergast in the film. He was a top aide for Africa on the Clinton administration. Barbara Lee as well, Maxine Waters, and hopefully President Bill Clinton, speaking of his remorse, this is the consequences if you don't act, in his tenure, of course, in the Balkans, and then Rwanda, of course. At this time, I'm open for any questions. Yes?
I have two unrelated questions. Why do you shoot black and white? And why is there so much paperwork in these refugee camps?
Paperwork?
Like getting your food stamped?
Well, the first question is, I prefer film of black and white. I think it's less sensational. It's a stronger medium. It's what I never studied photography, I should say. I came from experimental filmmaking. You know, some of the, Sebastian Salgado, if you know his work, the great Brazilian photographer, he's probably the best in the world today, and definitely the highest paid for what he does in the world today, and he still uses film and always will. There's no, the documentary photographer versus a photojournalist, we don't have deadlines. I mean, I sat 5 hours under trees in Sudan. I prefer that, but if you're working, you know, for the LA Times or Time Magazine, you better believe there's some guy behind a desk in a skyscraper yelling at you from his you know, satellite phone to tell you to get these images in. So one, I have too many bad habits. I could never put up with that. And two, I prefer working the way I do. So the second question on the paperwork, there again, these regions in the world are very poor. The neighboring countries, of course, are poor. They want to make sure that the aid gets to the proper refugees. And it's a you know, it's no different than the federal government. The UN's one large bureaucrat, for sure. Any other questions? Yes?
In a lot of the conflict regions we've been into, particularly Sudan and Iraq and so forth, there seems to be kind of a split where neither side or multiple sides of this factions really care to have witnesses around them. And I wonder if you could kind of give some additional information about working in those areas.
Well, what you learn is it's never, of course, black or white. And even all the research you may do before you enter these places, it's always gray, and your opinions would change. And things change on the ground, and when you come out of a place like this, your opinions will also change. What you have to understand is Iraq was different. I was embedded with the Marines during the invasion, and I had to go back when they actually caught Saddam, and I guess it was December 2003. I was shooting for a book, I should mention. I wasn't, I was one of the few embedded people that was not a journalist. There actually, when we first arrived, they actually wanted you there. Of course, that's changed. In Darfur as well, I think the civilians always want you there. This is a very small voice, a very small light in this part of the world that has absolutely nothing. You are that link to their tragedy, and they want tell their story. They don't care if it's the New York Times or it's someone like me. They want their voice to be heard. So you're always that connection, and you always get a lot of respect and from that as well from these people. So, yes.
In the trailer, you were introduced as a war photographer. I'm wondering where your drive comes from for that. Like when you're sitting in the Sudan, like in the desert for 10 hours waiting for something to happen. Like, what keeps you going? Like, where does your motivation come from, and how do you keep on going insane?
Yeah, well, the label of the war for I've done this for many years, as Jeff read, and I try to stay under the wire and continue to make films under my bed, south of Market, in a small little warehouse I've been living in. Unfortunately, they have come to me. I've never had this much attention with my work before, and I don't really feel comfortable, by the way. There is a line between awareness and exploitation with this kind of work. For me, all my work gets funded, but there's no check at the end. And I try not to sell my images if I can help it. I work other ways to make a living, in a sense, with photography and filmmaking, but this was something, I think sometimes it chooses you. I see a lot of people now doing it for the wrong reasons, that's for sure. There was about 600 embedded in Iraq, and about 2,000 on the sidelines, if it were, between whether in Jordan or Kuwait, waiting to go in after Baghdad fell. And I think if you go in it for the excitement part of it and the adrenaline, which is definitely there, and you witness history from the front lines, sometimes too close, you will burn out, either physically or psychologically. So you better have a really good reason and be committed, because this stuff doesn't leave you, as you can see, and it goes with you every part of your life. So, yes?
I came a little late, so I apologize if you already covered this, but I was wondering what you suggest, if anything, to do to help these people who are suffering.
It's a good question. I was going to get that with handouts. You may have known that our government, the U.S. government, has called this a genocide. Some people have called it crimes against humanity, like the UN. I was saying this at lunch. The United Nations, after Auschwitz, the 48 mandate, never again, they've never enacted that, by the way. The UN has never called a genocide a genocide. If they use that word, they really have to act. They play semantics like they did in Rwanda, in the Balkans. You can say that about Cambodia, East Timor, it goes on and on and on. So for me, I have little faith in them, by the way, in some ways, to really act on this. And then you have to look at who's on the Security Council. It's a lot of politics. You need to call your local editors, newspapers, media, to have them cover this. I mean, if an unknown photographer or filmmaker, from South of Market to San Francisco, I should say, by the way, with a total budget of $2,400, that included airfare from San Francisco to Chad, can do this. There's no reason why these other companies can't cover this. Also, the local representatives, senates, get this pushed on Capitol Hill. That there's a couple bills, the Darfur action bills that have been passed or locally. Senator Sam Brownback is working on it from Kansas. He had me on the Hill to speak. And Senator Barack Obama, Barbara Lee has been there, Maxine Waters has been there, Nancy Pelosi has been there, and Condoleezza Rice as well has been there, and was roughed up her people, which was the best thing that could have happened to her, I thought, in Khartoum. If they could do this to high officials in the White House, what are they doing to their own people in Darfur? So go online, savedarfur.org, punch Darfur into, Google. It comes up quite a bit, how to get involved. There's Dear Sudan campaigns. But then again, contact your politicians and the media. In the film, when you see the feature length of the film, we purchased 26 minutes, ABC, NBC, CBS combined in the year of 2004, the height of the crisis, gave only 26 minutes in 12 months to this. It broke down to 11 minutes, 5 minutes, and 3 minutes. And we show this as well in time lapse. They gave 10 hours to the Michael Jackson trial, and on and on and on. So, yes?
Given the fact that I've heard that Chad is recently getting involved, and Sudan is hurting Chad, could this have a regional war impact? And my second question is, most people are already gone. What could we do to return those people there other than direct military occupation?
Those are two very good questions. Yeah, it has changed more of a proxy war now, where you have the central government of Sudan, Khartoum, backing the Arab militia Janjaweed, and now you have openly Chad supporting the SLA since of last year. And there's been some border skirmishes. They had one relatively safe sanctuary in the east border of Chad, UN camps. Now that's been taken away. The Janjaweed have gone across, and they have tried to murder what there wasn't left to murder in Darfur of the refugees. The second question is, can they rebuild? As you hear Samantha Power in the film, she'll tell you this is not one-stop shop in a sense for genocide. It's going to take decades to bring this culture back. Just the psychological trauma the women have gone through from publicly being raped, multiply raped, the children witnessing their family members murdered in front of them. So, and if you saw from the countryside, there's nothing to go back to. The water wells are poisoned, their homes are destroyed. It's going to take a lot of work. They need somebody to really lead, maybe President Clinton, the Clinton Foundation, or something like this. Some people get involved in microcredit to help these people in the beginning. But first and foremost, you need security for the people in Darfur. And secondly, you can sort out the political situation with the rebels and the government. But you need security, medical aid, and food as of today. So, yes?
So a lot of the news stories that I read talk about the complexity of the relationships involved with the various groups in this area. And the dominant thing I get out is a sense of confusion about what could be done. Do you think that there is a sense of clarity at the sort of the high levels of our government, and it's just a lack of willpower, or do people not really have clarity about what we might do in these days?
Well, I think there again, I think a lot of governments around the world need to ask themselves, do they have the resources and the logistics to help this situation? And in 5 years' time from this day, it'll probably be a lot worse, the numbers, than Rwanda. And they can ask themselves that question again. It's not too broken that it can't be fixed. It is extremely complex. You have John Prendergast was just on 60 Minutes 2 weeks ago. You may have saw that. He stated right out that it's, on one hand, the White House is calling it genocide. On the other hand, they're flying in some of the main perpetrators of this into D.C. to get information on the war on terror. You have to understand that Osama bin Laden and Al-Qaeda lived there from 92 to 96. Now, they were foreigners, and you better believe that the Sudanese government kept an eye on them outside of Khartoum. Also, you remember President Clinton sent 2 cruise missiles in 98 to bomb what was supposed to be a weapons manufacturing plant and turned out to be a pharmaceutical company. And if you think about it, I was there during the elections in 2004 with the Kerry and Bush, and of course I had my little transistor radio, and of course my politics, it didn't go my way, but if you look at it, the SLA share the same common enemy with Washington, and that is the Khartoum government. They've always been on the list of terror. There's sanctions. They've never really had good relations. But now they're sleeping with it to get information about what bin Laden did for those 5-6 years. And so that's a resource they can't give up. And then at the other end, you have China and Russia that sit on the Security Council. They have economic interest in the Sudan. China more so with petrol, oil. Russia sells all the weapons to the government, so more military ties. And as you know, China is rising in the world economically, and they need fuel. They're going to do it with cheap fuel, just like we did it with cheap fuel. There's no other way. Yes?
Nowadays, there's a trend to kill non-embedded journalists. Is it getting worse? And how can it be stopped there?
Yeah, there was recently a man who was just a Pulitzer Prize winning journalist who was just arrested. I think it was kind of not well planned, in my opinion, the way he did it for his experience. They turn you over to the government. I spoke to a spy one time. They got quite upset. When I was in D.C. last to hang the photos on April 30th of this year, I was with Prendergast and others, and they told me that I'm officially on the list of State of the Enemy of Sudan since my touring of 2 years. So they're welcome to come down to South of Market, by the way, if they wish. There's no way actually last week I was supposed to be on a plane to Chad, and I canceled because I'm too involved to finish my film, but I will be going back soon. I could never go back with that government, that's for sure. They would be arrested at the airport.
How can the world make it safer for journalists to go to do these kind of things without getting persecuted?
That's a good question as well. It's kind of off the topic, but yes, there's more journalists being killed today than ever before. Back in World War II, in the Robert Capa era, or Vietnam, if you got too close to the action, you would, or step on a landmine, you would be killed. Now you're in their sights. This has been something happening for the last 20 years, which is very dangerous to work. So another question, please.
I sort of want to explore the idea. Google has the power to really bring attention and awareness to some of these issues. And, you know, we do doodles on the homepage, you know, and they're very cartoonish. And we would obviously not want to treat an issue like this in the same manner. Do you think there's a way that we could do, that we could sort of bring attention to an issue such as this in an appropriate and effective way?
Yeah, I think, I mean, this is my first time here, and I want to thank you again for having me. I'm really impressed with this building, and the lunch was great, and this is nice. So, you know, and it was free as well. I hadn't expected. But having said that, you have a lot of very, obviously a lot of very bright and innovative people that have been here since the beginning, and they could perhaps focus a little bit of that energy on what you're talking about. I think, I know MySpace is one of the sponsors for a Darfur exhibition. I'm part of 6 photographers that were traveling to 24 different museums and galleries. We opened in New York their digital projections. Next week, we're doing the U.S. Holocaust Museum in D.C., which these images will be projected on the outside of the building. But MySpace is one of the corporate sponsors. They've ran PSAs on their site with our images. You could do that. I'd be more than happy to give these to you free of charge, of course. Or just even a link to 10 steps how to get involved, you know, how to write to your senator, how to write the White House, how to send aid. I should mention Doctors Without Borders if you want to give money. They are by far the best NGO. I have a lot of problems with NGOs in the world, but this one is definitely the real thing. So, yes? Okay. Some go back further in the late 80s, but basically in more recently, and in kind of a paraphrased version, is there was a small rebel movement started in February of 2003 in the Darfur region. There again, they wanted to demand their rights, be counted as Sudanese citizens. The government had practiced in squashing these rebellions. They did it in the south for 20-some years. And so they went and they attacked right away and tried to take the will from the people, in a sense. Of course, the SLA got very organized and very powerful, and then at first they unleashed the Janjaweed to do their work because some of the members in the Khartoum government military were from this region, and of course they're not going to kill their own tribal people. So the Janjaweed they unleashed, which is very hard to rein back in, if even possible now. And so that's pretty much how it started. And then the ethnic cleansing started on top of that. So you have a civil war on top of a genocide, if you were, and then what the UN called in 2004 is one of the worst humanitarian crises in the world and still continuing. So, you know, this is the first time a genocide's been called a genocide as it's happening. And it's the first time that these student groups have organized to the fact that has been seen since apartheid in South Africa. And just that there's a movement of law around this is, even though small, it's something to look at. So, yes?
If you could put your images anywhere or in front of anyone, who would that be? Would that be the Senate? Would that be MySpace? And are you able to do?
Well, that's a very good question as well, because it's one of the kind of the themes of the film. What had more impact, showing these images to the common people on the train or to the Congress? And definitely the people on the train. We had 3 people break down in tears. 1, they don't see this kind of work, especially by someone who's done that in detail. 2, if they have seen this work, it's in Time magazine, they turn the page and, you know, there's a BMW ad or something like this. So it really brought in a kind of a personal perspective. I told the people of Darfur that I would get this work to the highest level. I did not expect to speak to Congress. Or even have my images selected to be hung in Congress. So it's good when you talk to groups like this and others, but I spoke to the people that actually have the phone to do something, and if they can't do something, that, you know, then we have to look at other alternatives. So one more question, or anybody in the back? Yes.
If we give to Save Darfur, where does our money go? How much actually gets to the refugees?
That's always a good question as well. I'm not affiliated with... Yes, okay. If you give money to one of these student groups, let's say savedarfur.org, what percentage of the money goes to the refugees in Darfur? That's a good question. These groups have hosted me throughout the country the last 2 years, whether it's at universities or other groups. The Genocide Intervention Network raised $250,000, these students. And they're asking me, should we send it to the African Union, which is a small force? Definitely not. There again, the World Food Program, I think, is a good start. You should send an email to savedarfur.org. They're based in DC. They're the ones who had the big rally April 30th on the public square, and also met with President Bush before this happened. You can ask them, they probably have a spreadsheet for you to send, so.